How many times do you think you've seen this screen in your life? 100? 1,000? Now, I'm a particularly big geek, and I have a bad habit of leaving games running overnight while I'm asleep, but I did a bit of math. I added up all my hours and all of my Source Engine games and landed at about 6,874 hours. That's a smidge over 3/4 of a year, and given that I'm 22 at the time of writing, that means that my computer has been running the Source Engine for about 3.5% of my entire life, and that doesn't even include certain source mods, time spent on my dad or my friends' Steam accounts, or pirated copies from when I was really young. With numbers like that, I think it's fair to say that the Source Engine has changed my life. Half-Life 2 is the game that made me buy my first computer that was actually mine. There was a time in my life when I was getting into Team Fortress 2, where on certain nights I couldn't close my eyes without finding myself in a match, my mind somehow managing to generate the actions of 2 whole teams worth of players in real times, probably just the pretensions of a spy main. A younger me once attempted to make companion cube and portal gun props out of pizza boxes and discarded milk jugs. I've had dreams that took place on GM Construct. I've pushed myself to the absolute limit, getting up to the second highest rank in competitive Counter-Strike, Supreme Master First Class. Hell, a video I did on the Half-Life series essentially jump-started my career here on YouTube, and all of that's just scratching the surface. So, what's so special about Source Engine? All of these games and memories could, hypothetically, have been made on any other engine. But, well, they weren't. One of the many ways the Source Engine has affected me through my life is that it basically inspired me to want to become a game director. I'm working on my first proper professional design doc now. However, making a game takes lots of money. To that end, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Atlas VPN. Atlas is running a pretty crazy discount right now, giving away their 3-year plan at just $1.39 a month. Check it out at the link in the description. After the TF2 source code leak led to this major aimbotting crisis that the game is going through, it seriously pays to have a bit of extra security. You never know what these bot makers are going to do next. I mean, shortly after the leak, everyone was telling you not to play any Source Engine games online for a little bit. But hey, if that wasn't enough for you, you can also use it to stream region-locked content on Netflix, YouTube, or whatever else. Seriously, you can watch The Shining and Full Metal Jacket just by switching your VPN to Australia. And of course, it can help you get the best prices. Back in the day, you could avoid paying taxes on Steam games by just switching your store region. With Atlas VPN, you can do that and more to get the best deals possible on all of your online shopping. So again, check out Atlas's $1.39 a month 3-year deal with the link in the description. Alright, back to the video. Valve did something special with the release of Half-Life 2 and Counter-Strike Source. These 2 games, coming out within 3 weeks of each other, were the first games released on the Source Engine, and all of the assets were totally free to use by anyone for any purpose. This might be outdated information, but according to partner.steamgames.com, you can sell a game made on the Source Engine without paying Valve a dime. The only caveat is that you need to pay a third party, Havok, a $25,000 licensing fee for their physics engine, which Source uses. This is why something like Hunt Down the Freeman is allowed to be on Steam. It's Valve's policy to not get all snippy about how the community uses its assets. While Hunt Down the Freeman is probably literally the worst game I've ever played, this is the same laid-back attitude that allowed the creation of The Stanley Parable, Minerva Metastasis, Research and Development, Entropy Zero, Vampire: The Masquerade Bloodlines, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, Team Fortress Classic, Synergy, Lambda Fortress, Portal Prelude, Portal Reloaded, Portal Stories Mel, Double Action Boogaloo, Fistful of Frags, Insurgency, Black Mesa, Mission Improbable, Dear Esther, The Beginner's Guide. The list goes on and on and on and on, and I haven't even mentioned Garry's mod yet. I've talked before about how a younger me appreciated Halo 1 for not really trying to stop me from getting out of bounds, and how it expanded my mind and kickstarted my understanding that games were, indeed, made by fallible humans. That inspired the hell out of me, and made me realize that I could someday make a game if I wanted to. Source Engine doubled down on this so hard. Again, the community was given the tools and the blessing to do essentially whatever they wanted with Half-Life 2 and Counter-Strike and future Source games. I mean, if you want to break Half-Life 2, all it takes is about 3 seconds in the command console. This right here is an amazing scene, but all I have to do is type one command in the console to turn this mysterious space god who's the entire crux of Half-Life's cryptic story into a ragdoll. Or hey, I could turn on NoClip and use good old Impulse 101 and go shoot Dr. Breen in the head 10 seconds into the game, changing the fate of humanity forever. These are all just fun shenanigans, but imagine what having this power means for a kid who's curious about how video games work. If you didn't know anything about this stuff but had access to the command console, a list of helpful commands courtesy of good old cheatscc.com, and the entirety of Half-Life 2, you could learn so much about the technology and methods behind games. Just by screwing around with AI Disable, you can break a lot of the game's scripted sequences and slowly piece together how exactly a level in a video game works. Killing G-Man in the beginning like that, well, that'll teach you that something as cool as the first G-Man scene is really as simple as spawning a G-Man character and telling him to say some words you wrote. This stuff was huge to me as a kid. Those early years screwing around in Source Engine were quite literally the foundation for my entire understanding of the technical side of games, and if that all wasn't enough to get you to install the Source SDK and start making your own game or level, a few years after Half-Life 2 came out, you got the developer commentaries.
The area you're currently entering is called the Cliffside Arena. We were particularly happy with the vertical cliffside in Half-Life 1, and regretted that we didn't iterate further on that concept in Half-Life 2. Vertical space allows us to force the player to deal with threats from above and below. We find that players focus their view on the direction they're traveling, so by using a cliffside and having the player ascend it, we ensure that the player will look up and be prepared for enemies. If the player's path was to move past the bottom of the cliffside, it would be unlikely he would notice soldiers rappelling down from above, and dying from unknown threats never feels fair and certainly isn't fun.
This blew my mind when I was a kid. Hell, it kinda blows my mind to this day. I still very distinctly remember the first time I heard this particular commentary note in Half-Life 2 Lost Coast. It shook me to the core. It's when I realized just how much work, thought, and technique went into good level design and game design. These commentaries are an absolute goldmine, years of wisdom being passed down from top-of-their-league game designers straight to anyone who's interested, in a fun way that could keep the attention of any kid who liked these games. So you've got this engine where the movement and physics feel really good. It comes pre-packaged with a whole bunch of awesome weapons, enemies, models, and textures, a level editor to do whatever you want with them, and a makeshift game design course to boot. Of course that was going to lead to an amateur game dev revolution. There have been so many incredible experiences made on this foundation, each one of them helping to further inspire other creators, and at one point, amongst it all, Garry's mod cropped up. As far as I'm concerned, Garry's mod is definitive proof that we're in the good timeline, at least for gaming. It's a creative utopia. You can take every other game in my Steam library, and maybe you'll start to come close to the amount of unique experiences I've had with this game. I've watched massive communities rise and fall. I've seen amateur game devs make their dreams come true. I've made friends, enemies, I've laughed, I've cried, I've created videos and memes and environments and wallpapers. I've told stories, I've gotten competitive, I've been casual, I've explored, I've learned. For God's sakes, I've even gotten to play Half-Life 2 in VR. I've done it all right here in this unassuming $10 package. You can even mod in Microsoft Kinect compatibility. It might be a little janky, but you can make anything with this game. This game right here has been, and is going to continue being, responsible for so many people getting into game development, because it and the Source Engine gave us the tools and the assets that are so hard to come by anywhere else, and put them in an environment that's actually pretty easy to use when compared to most other game development packages. Hell, even I've made a thing or two on Source Engine. Let's start with a fun one that I never thought I'd have any opportunity to talk about here. Call of Hurdy. A month or so ago, me and a friend of mine were talking about the Source SDK, and he showed me some of his old high school projects that he had laying around. Embarrassingly, his were all pretty awesome, while my only project was, well, this. A file called hurdy.zip had been sitting around in my Google Drive for about a decade, and I finally had a reason to download it again, and, I guess I made it on the 2007 version of Source Engine. Weird. Well, I couldn't manage to take down the Strider without cheats. Luckily though, I already had the command console enabled because I had to use it just to get into a level. Now, this was a serious trip down memory lane. I remember I made a couple other, slightly more impressive maps, but for some odd reason, Call of Hurdy is the only one I decided to hold on to. Moral of the story, I'm no game developer yet, but I've still had over a decade's worth of fun with the Source Engine. I remember way back in 2013 when Garry's mod was first starting to get mainstream, me and my friends would get home from school every day and start exploring the game mode list. One of my favorites was always Flood, where everybody would build ships for a couple minutes, then the map would flood and you'd try to destroy everyone else's ships. Then you had Trouble in Terrorist Town, still ridiculously fun to this day. In fact, I'd be playing it with my friends nightly if our server wasn't down right now. It feels weird to have to explain what TTT is, but, well, I hate to put it this way, but it's basically Among Us with guns. Me and my old friends used to go crazy with this game, always screaming at each other about who killed who, and frankly, that's still where I'm at in life. After TTT really blew up, you started to see a bunch of clones, each with their own little quirks and twists. Morbus was a particularly cool one, and then there was Murder and Hide and Seek, and lots of other cool little games about deception. Come to think of it, TTT kind of kickstarted a trend on Gmod for asynchronous multiplayer in general, like the Slender Game mode, where one person played as Slender Man, while the rest of the server had to find the notes before they were all killed, or Prop Hunt, where one team has to disguise as props and try to blend in to slip past the hunters. One of my favorite parts of all, though, is the RP side of Gmod. Now, I'm still a newbie to RP, only now being caught up in my first real D&D campaign, and only having done a little bit of real Gmod RP recently. Unfortunately, I'm kind of getting into Gmod RP at the tail end of its life. I mean, 99% of the servers that were doing actual roleplay are dead nowadays. Dark RP has kind of just turned into glorified cookie clicker, and Half-Life 2 RP is basically just one or two good servers that are doing campaigns and whatnot. But it wasn't always that way. I remember playing tons of Dark RP back when roleplay was a bit more of a focus in that game mode. Serious viewers might remember the Cheesy Minecraft, my old YouTube channel and Minecraft server from back when I was known as Papa Cheese, and my best friend was, accordingly, Baby Cheese. One moment that I don't think I'll ever forget is when the Cheesy Minecraft hit Dark RP. After a couple hours of building up our drug lab, we wound up in a gang war with some other player group. We were just dumb kids who didn't really understand strategy in shooter games or anything like that, so we had to rely on guerrilla tactics to beat these adults we were at war with. I don't remember how exactly we changed our usernames without anyone noticing. Maybe we flooded the chat, maybe the server didn't announce name changes, I don't know. But we joined the enemy gang, and over the next hour or so, we worked our way up their ranks until we were face to face with their leader, and I'll never forget the smirk on my face when I looked at the leader, pulled out my gun, and said on the mic, "Say hello to the cheese." To then hear a grown man shout from the other side of the computer, "It's the cheeses!" before we gunned him down. We quickly died, and they immediately raided our own base in our absence, but that's a moment that stuck with me so hard that maybe 3 years later, I went ahead and made this bumper sticker at a school field day. I hope I managed to find it, because otherwise you're just looking at a Photoshop recreation. Those were the old days of Dark RP, and I really feel like a boomer as I say that, but anyways, it wasn't exactly roleplay. I mean, we weren't playing as characters, we were just doing some faction war stuff, but there was real roleplay going on in Gmod at the time too. As I said earlier, I'm just catching the tail end of this in 2021. The whole communities basically fell apart after an update to Clockwork, the mod that serves as a foundation to it all, fragmented the game mode's presence on the list. But one of my best friends has been hosting a Half-Life 2 roleplay server for years now, running campaigns, guiding players and their characters on these long, intricate stories in the Half-Life universe, just being part of such a creative community. You sit down with anybody who was a part of Half-Life 2 RP in its best days, and I guarantee they'll have a million stories for you. That friend, though, he's been getting me on board the sinking ship that is Gmod RP, and even as the community is wrecked, I've had some genuinely magical moments there over the last few months. Everything from sad, genuinely gut-wrenching funerals for characters that we all loved, to conspiracies to kill more problematic people in our group, to betrayals from my own friends. So many awesome stories have happened there. On one server, I was playing as Penelope Smith, a spunky, energetic survivalist girl turned absolutely pathetic alcoholic, lamenting the loss of her mother to the Combine. After the first night, we finally had a place to settle down, only Penelope didn't feel like settling down. She stole some booze from one of the other people on the server and started cooking up some head crab legs she'd found that day before she passed out on the floor. The building would have burned down on her watch if it weren't for the only person who was still putting up with her coming to her rescue, trying to finish cooking the food before cleaning the bits of vomit off of Penelope's unconscious face and turning her on her side so that she didn't drown in her sleep. Unfortunately, Penelope never got to have her redemption arc, but man, it was genuinely amazing roleplaying her downward spiral into alcoholism, and watching everybody else roleplay their characters' reactions to losing a trustworthy friend to it. Seriously, I hope that Sandbox revives the roleplay community a bit, because stuff like this is so special, and it's all possible because the Source Engine and Gmod gave somebody the tools they needed to make a roleplay system that could support all of this, and we're still basically at the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the world of creativity that the Source Engine has spawned. I, maybe, have explored a 50th of the game modes, the small little communities that have existed in Garry's mod, and that's just one game. There are so many little communities that have existed in Counter-Strike, Team Fortress 2, HL2 Deathmatch, and Left 4 Dead. Surf, B-Hop, Jump, Zombies, Jailbreak, Death Run, KZ, Gun Game, MGE, Trade Servers, Team Fortress Mario Kart, Volleyball, MG, that Left 4 Dead game mode where it's a huge team of infected against bot-controlled survivors. So many little game modes, and that's all just off the top of my head. Then you've got the homebrew communities for playing the base games. Potato TF, Creators TF, to name some of the more recent ones. I guess Faceit could count too. Tons of others have risen and fallen before I ever heard of them. Then there are the communities of so many different Team Fortress or Counter-Strike YouTubers. Lazy Purple, Uncle Dane, Stabby, Mr. Paladin, 3Clicks Phillip, War Owl, While Such Gaming. Forgive me if I'm missing some. Even my community, with its love of Half-Life, could count. Who Mobile's Weird Maps series is a great look at some of these forgotten communities. Every single one of these and more has years of history, in-jokes, drama, high points and low points, infamous members, good years and bad years, and that's not even counting the Hammer and Source Filmmaker communities. So much history between all of them, and they all share one thing, a love of the Source engine and the things it's made possible for us, the opportunities that it's opened up, the friendships it's led to, the hours upon hours of memories. Sure, it could technically have happened with any old engine, but there was something special about the Source engine. Half-Life 2 inspired the creation of the Source engine, sure, but this legacy of nearly 20 years of friendship, creativity, and community, this is what the Source engine was really made for. Before I close out this week's video and get to writing about the Shadow of the Colossus, I'd just like to go ahead and verbally thank the patrons, especially those who are donating $10 or more monthly on Patreon, such as Ada Avery, Almost Dead Again, Anatoly Volnov, Andrew Melnick, Antoine Deguette, Benny, Big Time Jim, Bobby Blitz, CJ Keene, Chompy Uwu, Christopher Pinar, Colin Gajic, Cosmo Borski, Darius Fazier, David Kaiser, Dennis Vashakamer, Dominic Johan, Duncan Bristow, Fralum, Giles Backers, iDubbbz, IJK, Jack Eisenberg, Jano, Kale Graybill, Crit, Laffy, Mello, Mixer Rules, Neurofilter, PJ, Raptor, Ryan Webster, Robert, Scotty for Marketing, CeeLo, Tanman, Vivian Cox, William T, Keen Vo, Yimin Shi, Zoe Nish, and Zyrobly. I'd also like to just thank everyone who's gotten this far for being patient with me over my 2-week break recently. It was a bad time for me to take a break in terms of how the channel was doing, but it was just basically necessary for my mental health. And I'm sorry for the drop-off in quality lately. I feel a whole lot better about just where I'm at with the channel than I did before my break, so hopefully this is a change in the breeze for me. I should also point out that I might be switching to doing videos every other week. It just sort of depends on how I feel now that I'm back in my workflow. But anyways, thanks everyone for watching.